This is a Film Stories original podcast.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love, starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale and I'm delighted to be joined by David Thomson, and today we're going to have a special supplementary episode in which we're going to be talking about Jonathan Glazer's second film, Birth. How are you, David? And thank you for joining me.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and how I am we will pass over. I'm in America, so that affects how I am.
So let's move on straight away to the sort of the delights or otherwise of Jonathan Glazer's Birth, probably his most reviled at the time film.
Yeah.
It came out in 2004. Sexy Beast had come out 4 years previously and had been greeted with some admiration, although it came out in the midst of a swathe of British gangster movies, and so was a little bit lost in the crop. But Birth was the difficult second album, was the first big studio movie that he was going to do. When did you first see it, and what was your reaction?
I can't recall precisely the first screening, but I'm pretty confident that I saw a press screening of it here in San Francisco, and I was already getting into the idea of doing a book about Nicole Kidman, so it was obviously an unusually compelling occasion because of that. I would say that from the first time I saw it to the most recent time, which was last night, to be as sharp as I could be for you, I thought it was an absolutely extraordinary, very moving, very unsettling film. I'm more wary than I've ever been to say films are great and a masterpiece and that kind of thing. I would just say that for me, this is an essential film. And one of the reasons why I find it so profound and why I keep going back and looking at it is that it's unsettled in my mind. I both like the fact, but I'm a little put off by it, that I think there are a lot of problems in it. And I mean, when I say problems, I mean ways in which the story, or what I will call the story, has been left incomplete and dangling. I'm not against that. I'm fond of incomplete stories in a lot of ways, but I'm getting so much out of this film in certain ways that I do find these holes in it, and holes is a crude word, but still, I find them more troubling. And I saw it again last night, as I said, with my wife, and we've been talking about it then and this morning. And problems begin with, why is it called Birth? There is a child born in the course of the film. There is very early on a beautiful shot of a baby being born effectively. And you get the title Birth, but I'm not sure what Glazer meant by that. I wonder sometimes whether Glazer sometimes reaches a point where he doesn't quite know what his films are about. And I don't mean that as simply criticism. I think it's a condition of the way he operates. But the title confuses me. He is quoted often as saying it is a film about eternal love for him. I don't understand that. I think it's a film principally, a lot of elements in it, but I think principally it's about a woman going mad. And I think that from the first viewing till the most recent, for me, Kidman's commitment to that and her instinct and her cleverness is the sort of, it's the spine of the film. It's what sustains it. And not that this was a commercial film in any way, but to the extent that they may have had commercial hopes and prospects, I would think that the picture hung upon the possibility that the audience would identify with or feel for Anna, the Kidman character, and be moved. Now, clearly, when the picture opened, that didn't happen. It didn't get that kind of big emotional response. I think in the years since, there's been much more appreciation of the film. But even so, I'm still not sure that many people are as moved by it as I feel moved by it. So there's my opening stance on it. I mean, tell me how you respond to what I've just said.
I totally agree with what you say in terms of, well, first of all, I'll take the title because I feel that the title seems to miss something out. And this goes with what you were saying about holes or lacunae, if you want a more
Right.
sort of elegant expression. But Rebirth seems to be a much more sort of apposite title. The idea of rebirth, as in the theme of reincarnation, which is the sort of MacGuffin of the whole film, and also Anna being reborn from her grief as another sort of process which is taking place throughout the film. What the quote that you have given of Jonathan Glazer talking, and I totally agree with you. I think Glazer is very not untrustworthy is like his intention, but he seems to be pushing his films outside of the limits of his own comprehension.
Yeah. So that I think that puts it very well. Yeah.
That he doesn't really have a handle on it. So he could pitch this film as, oh, it's about love. But to me, the film is much more about hatred and contempt, and it's about the illusion of love. But what happens when you love someone who's not worthy of that love? Because ultimately the object of Anna's love is incredibly cruelly ripped away from her, and we as an audience are aware that this guy that she has spent 10 years mourning and who she is willing to capsize her life over and, as you say, going to the borders of criminality and insanity, just isn't worthy of it. He's been betraying her all along. He's been betraying her his own brother. So there's a whole. I don't see any eternal love there at all. I see the gestures towards that, the language of it, and but I don't see the actual meaning of it, except in so far as you could say, if Nicole Kidman believes herself to be in love, that's enough.
Okay, but you're touching on something that is sort of the beginnings of what I see as a crack in it. We don't really know what the quality of the marriage was. All we see is the occasion of Sean's death, and then we come forward 10 years. She's at the grave, and it's a very long shot, but it's beautifully done, and you do feel her grief is still active in her. And I think one of the most interesting things in the film is the way in which you get the impression that after the death of Sean, her family have gathered around her in an attempt to be protective, but in a rather slightly imprisoning feeling too. That apartment and that family, they seem full of care for her, but there's something clammy and confining about it, I think. And I think that's all through the film. And it only makes me wonder what they, onlookers to that marriage, what they saw. And if I'm asking that question, then I wonder seriously whether the film shouldn't have done a little more to answer that question. I like the idea that we don't really see Sean. We don't see his face in the film. We hear his voice, but we don't really have a take on him. And the film sort of says, well, she's had this immense grief for 10 years. And Joseph will say at the engagement party what a long haul it was to get her to think about really seeing anyone, dating anyone, having an ongoing life. And there is something about Kidman's appearance in the film of someone who has been arrested in development. She's a very, very good instinctive actress, and I'm not sure that she could have spelled it out, but there's a very inhibited, stricken quality to her from the beginning, although ostensibly she looks like the attractive woman she is. But it's there, it's a feeling. And okay, we will learn that Sean betrayed her, but do we know enough to really understand and place that betrayal? And should we not know more about what it did to her? Because if this is a story, and I really think it is, about a woman going mad, then I think the process of going mad was there a long time ago. I mean, it seems to me almost logical that the marriage for her was not good enough for her to smother doubts about it. I think the way in which the family gather around her in this protective way, I feel it's because they worry about her stability. And, you know, ostensibly, Joseph seems like a good guy. And if she's back in the world, back in the romantic world again, that's good. But I have that feeling that the mother, Lauren Bacall particularly, is on guard because they feel there's a problem with Anna. As I see the film several times, I feel that line through the film, that this is a woman who didn't really understand her marriage, didn't really come to terms with the grief. So when she tries to resume life, she's going to run into the problems we see. And you know, I mean, I think in the sort of terms of that the film proposes, she really goes crazy. She's in a dangerously disturbed sense at the end. The extraordinary ending on the seashore, fabulous scene. I don't know that she's going to recover.
Yeah, and what that recovery could even possibly look like.
I know.
What's going to happen that afternoon, you know?
Yes.
And also, if she has to go somewhere quiet, somewhere where a wealthy family of her, similar to her family, that sort of wealthy family will have these clinics, the address names and addresses of these places and consultants who can place her somewhere. Is it somewhere she's already been to? Is it somewhere she's going back to? You know, even the short hair perhaps speaks of someone who's been an inpatient at a clinic somewhere.
I agree totally, and you know, I think that as always with her, she works very, very hard on how she looks, and I'm sure that was in consultation with Glazer and costume people and all that kind of thing. When she first appears in the film, she looks like the sexy Nicole Kidman everyone was used to. And I think as the film goes on, she is dressed and she's photographed in a decreasingly sexy way. One would have to look at it closely, but I feel that that's there. And I think it's part of a kind of a shrinking away from life. There's a quite simple sex scene involving her and Joseph, and it's shot in such a way, he's on top of her. We don't really see his face, we see her face. It's very much, I feel, tell me what you think, but I feel it's something that's happening to her and not exactly working. Now, I've had talks with other people who felt differently about it, but it almost seems to me that he's a grown man and she's almost an adolescent figure. And I'm not sure what Glazer or anyone thought that meant, but it does contribute to this feeling that I think is there from the outset, that she's a disturbed person. And from a lot of the film, she walks through her life okay, but when she really gets involved with Sean the younger, I think she's going crazy. And she's really a lost soul at the end. And another thing that I would say about that, I don't believe in a real world, and that's not necessarily to be imposed on the film, but in a real world, I don't think Joseph would marry her after what he's seen. There's a moment where he really pauses in considering, because she sort of proposes to him on the second time around, and he says, yes, okay. I didn't believe that. I felt he was a regularly selfish, self-concerned person, not a bad person, but, he gets very upset, and the younger Sean is a rival, understandably. He's clearly got anger and violence in him. I don't believe he would marry her, because I think he would say to himself, this is a sick woman. Yeah. And it's one of several things in the film that just affect me in terms of plausibility. And there are too many of them to just say, well, this is a fairy story. And clearly there are elements of fairy story in it. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was about to I was about to use the fairy story sort of frame in a sense. I mean, I do think that he is someone who is very aware of power, and he is very aware that he has lost power. And in a way, when she comes as something of a supplicant to him, although she is careful to say, I don't regret what happened, or I would, I
don't take responsibility for it.
That's right. Yes.
Yes.
He is still in the position of going, okay, now I get to consent. Now I get to. Right. Now you are coming to me. So I see that as a form of like, okay, I'm having my cake and eating it, and we can go on. So from a level of plausibility, I sort of saw that, and I sort of saw him as well as being a little bit deranged himself, partly because of the extent of his pursuit of her. Who spends years going after someone like that, right, and constantly being knocked back? And partly because when he does have that breakdown and he's shouting at Sean, it's one of those situations where the words don't make any sense, right, in terms of who they're aimed at. He's sort of saying he lives in the world, he takes no responsibility. It's just like, you're shouting at a 10-year-old child. Are you talking about yourself now? Are you talking about the Sean Senior? So it is almost as if that madness kind of infects the house to some degree.
Yes.
And I love the fact that someone like Lauren Bacall's character as the matriarch is one of the few people who's sort of unaffected and is trying to keep a plausible, realistic story going. She's the only one with any real sense of humor when she gives Sean his cake and says, does Mr. does Mr. Resurrection want his cake now? And
Yeah, 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 yeah. No,
when
I
she
agree. I
when she
agree.
looks at the new baby and she says, maybe that's Sean. It's sort of
Yeah.
like,
No, I mean there is real humor there. Yeah, yeah,
but going back to Nicole Kidman's and that thesis of the madness from the very beginning, and sort of connecting it a little bit to the fairy tale, and this hits a couple of points that you were saying. One of the things is that repeated story of how she got married in 30 churches in 30 days. That strikes me as a sort of Bluebeard form of hypnosis. And again,
I
it's
agree.
it's sort of
Yeah,
like, who does that? At what point do you go, okay, hang on, after how many days would that work before you were just bored of it, or it was
yes,
rendered semantically meaningless? It's like
right,
repeating a word over and over again.
right.
So there are those things which either you feel are these things that are invented, or they just don't seem to apply to the, as you so rightly say, they don't really apply to the real world. And when you see the sort of wallpaper of that flat, it's sort of
That green color. Yeah,
yeah, it's kind of a Rossetti-esque sort of
yeah,
William Morris.
yeah,
It's like the outside is inside, the inside is outside feel to it. I do feel there's something sort of magical going on, and she is sort of like a trapped. I mean, even her eyes, her eyebrows, and I think that you make this point in the book that her eyes are sort of slightly feral. There's a sort of
yes,
feline look to her.
yeah, yeah. No,
And when
absolutely.
she goes to the opera, she's wearing this strangely nude-looking dress that she's
Yeah,
in.
yes, and the way in which they arrive at the opera late and are escorted to their seats, disturbing other people, but no one pays any attention to that. And when you think about it, that's quite an unreal moment. Two people coming to the opera that late and the way they do would cause a bit more of a stir. But it's as if the rest of the audience know they're waiting for her in a way. You know what I mean? It's I mean that's absolutely superb moment in the film, and obviously a huge test of the actress, and one she comes through completely, I think. However, let's switch a moment. The more I see the film, the more I become obsessed with Clara, the Anne Heche character. And again, there are things about her that just bowl me over. I think it's the best performance in a very well acted film. But there are things that I have real trouble believing at the same time. And I find it hard to believe two things. One, that Clara has enough rage or spite or evil in her to give Sean's love letters to her as an engagement present. I mean, that's an incredibly hostile action. Now, she changes her mind at the last moment and then buries them in the park. Those letters, the possession of those letters, the power that they offer, I think, is probably what sustains her emotionally. I don't believe she would ever let them out of her possession. And it hurts me in a way because I think Anne Heche is so extraordinary in the film.
But isn't her burying them? I mean, he dies in the park, so isn't it her way of sort of closing? I mean, she reminds me a little bit of a squirrel as well, that she's sort of burying them to then go back at some later point and dig them up and you know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Maybe she'd be more inclined to burn. She was either going to keep them or burn them.
Yeah, I mean, there is something witch-like about her.
Yeah.
It fits with the atmosphere of fairy story we're talking about. And I think she was cast in part because her look helps with that too. And in addition, there is a very interesting class difference in this film. I mean, she and Clifford, and obviously Sean, are not us of this Upper East Side apartment world that we see most of the time. And she's rougher than the other women in the film, if you know what I mean. And she delivers that effortlessly in tiny gestures. But she's a tough person, and she's vital to the execution of the plot. And you know, when you think about how Glazer approached this, I think clearly he understood, and I'm sure was told by everyone else, you've got to tidy this mystery up. We can't put this film out there in a way that says, well, look, we haven't made up our mind about reincarnation. It could be a real thing, because I don't think there's any box office for that. And I think that the possibility of that is one of the reasons that hurt the film. So we've got to explain the trick to it. And that makes her very nasty, but as I say, not entirely credible. And it also, it makes Sean, young Sean, part of the plot. I'm not sure I believe in a 10-year-old, except in A Fairy Story, being quite as malicious as that. So, you know, these are a collection of issues that trouble me while I'm watching a film that absolutely absorbs me. And I have no doubt about this. I think this is it's a wonderful film, and if I go on long enough, I will call it a great film. I hold back a little bit on that, but it's a necessary film, an essential film. It's a film I feel I have to watch every couple of years or so. You know, there are films, I'm sure you've got them in your life, that you're not quite sure if it's a great film, but you can't wait to see it again.
Isn't it the I remember reading in a book once the idea of the soul thread in certain native peoples who make tapestries, and they don't want it to be perfect because that would trap their soul inside.
Right.
So they leave a soul thread out. And I think there are certain imperfect films which I adore, and as you say, I love a film like Blade Runner, for instance. I'll watch it repeatedly, but it's a very imperfect film. It's got like tonal changes which are just all over the place. The story doesn't make much sense. There's I can never quite work out which version I should be watching because the voiceover's a bit clumsy, but without the voiceover, there's these moments where you keep thinking there should be a voiceover here. It's too, nothing's happening. Where are we? So I feel this a similar thing with. I feel that plot is coming to pieces towards the end, and the real questions are, there's a level of ambiguity which can be inside the DNA of a story. Rashomon, the ambiguity is the point. And then there's another level of ambiguity which is just like, this is just a feature of you haven't worked out story. It's right. The storytelling itself hasn't been fully worked out, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That can have very fruitful a character who isn't controlled by the creator is actually, and I would argue most great characters probably come under that category. But here you're right, the wheels coming off it can be troubling. I mean, because you're given a choice, really. Either 10-year-old Sean Sean Jr. is either he is Sean Sr. reincarnated, which immediately opens up a whole bunch of other questions. Why this guy in particular? Why does he only realize it at this age? Et cetera, et cetera. Or he's like a deliberate fraud, who's read the letters, perpetrating, or he's a boy with psychological problems who has read the letters and has had this association via the letters and has gone, oh my God, this is me. I'm this person.
Yes.
This guy, maybe he's heard his father talking about this guy dying, and he goes, "Oh, that guy died when I was born." So maybe, I remember when I was a kid, I was a Catholic. I was brought up Catholic, and I would go to mass, and I was an altar boy, and I said to the priest once, "Who's Peter God?" And the priest was like, "What do you mean, who's Peter God?" I said, "Well, at the end of every mass you say thanks Peter God." And he said he thought that was hilarious because my father's called Peter, and he did a sermon about it, but of course he was saying thanks be to God, thanks be given to God.
Yes.
And it's just that childish mind incorporating something and absorbing it into their own sort of psychic universe. And I sort of thought, that's kind of what I feel Sean is doing, because I don't believe he's manipulative. I don't believe he's got way too much preternatural confidence. That if we're watching a tale of insanity, it's kind of two insanities meeting. It's two forms of, he has the confidence of a lunatic,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that puts it very well. And I mean, clearly, it's vital to the film and certainly to its commercial prospects that he has not gone through puberty. He's an innocent child. Now, there are many things about him that aren't innocent, but sexually, he's innocent. It's interesting that he has really no contact with other children, too, because I think that helps preserve his innocence. But if you look at it several times, and I'm sure you have the way I have, there are moments where he's very cold-blooded, not childlike in the sense that we like children. As you say, it's a film in which most of the people who get any sort of time disturb people. Clara is, Clifford, who is very thinly drawn, but Peter Stormare makes something unsettling about him. And it's a film full of very good actors, so that no one is sort of thrown away entirely, but no one is maybe as fully developed as you sort of wish they could be.
I want to speak up for Ted Levine as well, who has the role of Sean's father.
No, please do. Yeah.
He says that thing about they have money, who are these people? They have money.
Yes.
And he does that thing of laughing when he's explaining essentially the plot. He says he's her dead husband, and he goes, "No, I shouldn't laugh," But that's kind of immediately gives you the sense of what their relationship is, the husband and wife, and they have a jokey, warm. Sean is not coming from a unloving, cold, poor, deprived environment. It's coming from a working class environment, certainly. But his father's a music teacher. They're cultured,
Yeah. I wonder how the film is going to settle in. I mean, obviously the film is 20 years old, which these days is easily time for it to be forgotten completely. I don't think this is going to be forgotten, and obviously that owes something to the fact that Glazer has made this remarkable career of not working in feature films too often, and every film is different, and every film is sort of problematic in the way we've been talking about. There's nothing unduly tidy about his work, if you know what I mean. And I share your feeling that untidiness can be a very stimulating quality in film, particularly where so many films are very cut and dried. And if Jonathan Glazer were to say, and I'm not saying he has said this, but if he were to say, I don't really fully understand my films, any of them, I would sort of applaud. I wouldn't think that rules him out of court. I think it's a sign of extraordinary quality, and I think probably Buñuel would have said that. I think Bergman would have said it, and other directors would have said quite honestly and quite openly that their films have things in them that are beyond their comprehension.
This is interesting because I think he other than contractual obligations during the moment of release, he really doesn't want to talk about his films at all.
Yes.
I've tried to get him to talk, to do interviews, and it's been very politely but firmly, thank you for looking at it, but I'd rather not. I'm looking forward. And interesting that you mentioned Buñuel as well, because the screenwriter of this film
Yes. Yes.
is a one of the main collaborators with Buñuel for
Yeah.
many of his most successful films.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that actually, I think Carrière was a little bit more than just a collaborator. I think in Buñuel's last years, he did a lot of the real work on those films. I talked to Carrière, you probably did too, at one time about this film, and he was deliciously vague about it. He was not helpful at all, in a way that made me think this was a project that could have gone in a lot of different directions. And you probably know better than I do, but there was a time, I think, when Glazer was back and forth to Paris talking with him about it. And I would love to have a digest of what went on in those conversations, because maybe things were talked about and considered, even filmed, that didn't make it to the final film, that might have helped some of the problems I feel, might have opened up more problems. But I would like to know what happened.
There is a moment in the film where you see Sean sort of sitting in a corridor waiting, and it's very late on in the film. It's when revelations are about to be made, and he himself, I think, has begun to understand himself. And there's a sort of, I forget the technical term for it, but it's basically a superimposition of
That's
him
right.
looking in different directions. And that, to me, feels like you're looking at a palimpsest of the different drafts of the film. That this film could literally go off in different directions.
Yeah, yeah. I had a sort of, at that moment, I get a sort of flash of Persona. Well, obviously the same faces are filmed in very different ways sometimes. But I mean, I think we're placing Glazer in a category of deeply imaginative films that are quite prepared to depart from our sense of reality, which I think is a noble calling. And I take Glazer very, very seriously, even though sometimes I get frustrated at what I think is an awkwardness with story. I felt with Zone of Interest that the conception was so brilliant. And, you can say that it's Martin Amis's conception, but Glazer does a great deal to make it real on screen. It's so extraordinary that by the end of the film, you feel that certain of the narrative lines are just too conventional in a funny way. I don't know, feeling I had with the film. I've only seen that a few times so far. So,
yeah, that's a very interesting point. What do you think? I mean, one of the main reasons I feel that this film was, sort of crashed at the box office at a moment when Nicole Kidman was making was at the height of her powers.
yeah.
I mean, she won an Oscar while making this film. She won the Oscar for The Hours. The main sort of reviews at the time was, this is just icky. We don't, the scene with Beth,
very
the
much
kiss.
so, yeah.
We don't, this is, I mean, I think Glazer is someone who's very, very influenced by, as well as the Europeans like Buñuel, but also Kubrick, and there's an element of Lolita here, that this is but it goes even further than Lolita, because Lolita is a post-pubescent, this is a prepubescent child, so there's absolutely zero possibility of, not even that anyone would with Lolita justify it, but it strikes me as it goes into such dangerous territory so boldly, not only in those explicit scenes, but even in the dialogue where he says, we made love on your couch,
Yeah,
to have a child deliver that line
I know.
is a
I know.
bold conception.
I mean, you almost feel at a moment like that some extra interior voice, exorcist like, is speaking out of his mouth. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And goes back to what you were saying about cruelty as well, because that's an act of aggression. That he's saying that to the guy is like,
Absolutely, absolutely.
oh, by the way, your home, we did it there as well.
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely.
Returning just briefly as well to Clara, because I think you're absolutely right that she's the core. Because in many ways, I mean, we see her very early on reflected in a mirror that she buys to replace
Right.
the letters as the gift, and she's set up as a mirror to Nicole Kidman as somebody who they both fell in love with the same person. But even when she confronts Sean, she sort of says, I could have explored this if I'd believed in it. I could have explored this, and it's like she wouldn't have, like, you feel Nicole Kidman has this sort of Anna has this plot of like, okay, almost like a Humbert, I'll take you somewhere nobody knows us, we'll grow up, I'll pretend you're my son, and when you're of age then we can get married.
Right.
Clara's version of this is, we could do this right now. I would be a paedophile right now if I believed this was true. So she's kind of the demonic Anna.
It really is. I mean, she's
like
a
the
frightening
id.
woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And obviously, Hish was not a happy or stable person. But I don't think she made a film. I don't think I've seen everything, but I can't think of a film where that quality in her is delivered so calmly, because she doesn't lose it in the film. She's a frightening person. And again, you ask yourself, well, what was it that Sean, the oldest Sean, loved in her? And the possible answers are not too wholesome, I think.
Yeah, she's and also presumably a love that superseded his love for Anna, because he gives her Anna's letters, which is an act of betrayal and also an act of handing over power to her.
Yes.
Because she can then at that point she can destroy his marriage whenever she likes.
Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Where would you position this film? We've talked about where it stands, perhaps in the context of Jonathan Glazer's career. So he then comes back with Under the Skin, which, similarly to Birth, is not amazingly well received. I think it sort of it gains cult status much more quickly than Birth does.
Yeah.
But it was solidly booed at Venice when it was shown, not only at the press screening but also at the premiere, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
But where does this film for you stand in relation to Nicole Kidman's career?
Well, I think that instinctively she likes danger. And I think over quite a long period now, she has been able to maintain a commercial status while doing some really unexpected, risky films. And I think there was a period in which this was sort of both masked in but enhanced by her sexual attractiveness, which, naturally as age advances has diminished now, although she does these horrible TV series, she still seems alert enough to know when something challenging, risky comes along. I don't think that many actresses would have done Birth. I don't think that many would have done The Hours. I don't think they would have done the Diane Arbus film, for instance, and they're all in fairly close period of years. It's very difficult to think of someone of her time who has been willing and has had the instinct and the taste to know the possibility in a project and the people she would be working with, and to go with them and to commit to it. I think that I think what's special about her is that quality of danger. And I dare say there were advisors, because these people always have their entourage of advisors, who would have said, "I'm not sure you should do this film, Birth." And I could believe that she at times might have said, "Well, yes, you're probably right, but I'm going to do it because there's something in it that frightens me." And I think what frightens her stimulates her a lot. And I just want to get that experience. And a lot of actresses of her age don't do that. They're much more safety conscious in terms of their choices. And I admire enormously the way she's gotten away with it, And she works hard. And I'm one of those people who thinks that if you're going to make films, make as many as you can. One of the things that troubles me about Glazer is that he doesn't make enough films. I mean, right. I have no right to say that. And they're all interesting. But I love the days when directors made 2 or even 3 films a year, because I think you learn a lot. And it's not possible to work that way. But anyway, Kidman does sort of make 2 or 3 films a year, it seems to me. And some of them are awful. But some of them are still amazing. She's sort of fearless. And that's rare.
Yeah, I watched her, I think it was at Venice last year, Baby Girl.
Yeah.
And that was, again, a really brave, interesting take on, sexual politics. And it felt like an updating of very old arguments, but it kind of felt fresh as well.
I agree. And I think that, I would say that when she finally consents to be an old lady on screen, I think she could be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I remember when this film showed, I'm not sure if this showed at Venice as well, Lauren Bacall was sort of quite snippy in interviews saying, somebody had addressed Nicole Kidman as a legend or something, and she said, she's hardly a legend.
Yeah.
How can you? Yeah, my heart goes out to the PRs trying to deal with that kerfuffle.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned it, but music in the film is extraordinary too.
That's absolutely right. Yes, beginning with that sort of. For some reason, it reminds me of The Shining. That sort of prowling.
I know what you mean. Yes,
shot following the jogger.
I know just what you mean. Yeah, and that scene where he's running, it goes on longer than it's needed. You've got the idea, okay, the guy's jogging in Central Park in the winter in the snow. He's going to have a heart attack and drop dead. Okay, you could do that. You could accomplish that much more quickly than Glazer does. It's as if he fell in love with the camera angle he has, a sort of high shot behind the runner and the snow. And that wonderful moment quite early in the shot where I think 4 dogs run across the track. And these are 4 dogs from a fairy story, and somebody was training those dogs when to go and everything. And I love that moment in the film.
Absolutely. It's just like those wonderful sort of, I think the Coen brothers always say they have great luck with birds, because there's the bird in Barton Fink, and in Blood Simple, their first film, sort of the shadows of the birds cross the road and just make the shot,
Right. Yeah.
It's this wonderful Who was it? There was the guy who does Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, the French
Oh, yeah.
director. He said something about whenever you get real weather, use it, because nothing looks as good as real weather
Like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which is sort of, I mean, not saved because it's a great film, but it had the great good fortune that snow began to fall on the location at just the moment, so that the conclusion to the film, if you remember it, was shot in sort of real weather time.
Yeah, absolutely. What a wonderful film. I saw that at Bologna a couple of years ago at Cinema Ritrovato, and my word, does that film stand up? It's such a
It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
such a wonderful film.
yeah.
Julie Christie and Warren Beatty.
They're great together. Yeah,
Just wonderful. Warren Beatty as well. He has such a great character of. He's so good at playing people who think they're smarter than they actually are.
I know. And that's not a million miles from him.
There's a reason for that. Life imitates art, etc.
Yes.
Wonderful, David. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed talking to you about
I've enjoyed it too.
About birth.
Yeah. Good.
And I can't wait to talk to you about some subject in the near future.
I hope so. I always enjoy talking to you. And I mean, we should add, you have a book on Jonathan Glazer, which is appearing when?
This is appearing July the 28th, so it might even be out
Almost tomorrow. Yes. Okay. Well, good luck with that book.